Tim Judah. I'm the Balkans correspondent of The Economist magazine, and so I'll be moderating this session. The first thing I have to do is, of course, to say thanks to our sponsor, which is Telekom Slovenia, the leading Slovenian telecommunications company and one of the most long-standing supporters of the Bled. 2 or 3 years ago, I wrote a piece for The Economist in which I used the term Yugosphere about the re-knitting of links between the countries of the former Yugoslavia. And I'm always especially grateful to Telekom Slovenia, because when I go to Kosovo and I turn on my British mobile phone, it says, "Welcome to Slovenia," because of course Telekom Slovenia is one of the biggest investors in Kosovo. On that positive note as well, I was thinking about this again yesterday. I came from a panel in Belgrade, and about 35 minutes out of Belgrade along the highway, I saw a new, it looks like a big distribution center for Atlantic Grupa from Croatia, which again is I'm always very grateful to, as a great supporter, in inverted commas, of my theory of the Yugosphere, because, of course, as many of you know, Atlantic Grupa is one of the most important food and other distribution companies of Croatia, bought last year, I think it was last year, Droga Kolinska here, which of course in turn owns many Serbian brands, which in turn distributes all over the former Yugoslavia. So those are some of the positive things. In general terms, countries of the Western Balkans have been progressing in the last year or so pretty well towards Europe, which is in general terms coterminous with progress in general. But of course there are some clouds on the horizon. Mr. Jeremic and I were on a panel yesterday in Belgrade, which was about the European future of Serbia, and I think that many people were too polite, apart from me, to mention the M word, as in Merkel, referring to Mrs. Merkel's visit to Belgrade recently, where it was slightly unclear, but at one point she definitely said no candidacy for Serbia in December unless so-called parallel institutions are dismantled in northern Kosovo. Well, I'm sure that Mr. Jeremic will address that. A couple of things. I'm not going to refer to everybody here, but I'm hoping that Mr. Rocin, also the Foreign Minister of Montenegro, of course, in general terms, Montenegro is also progressing well towards Europe, but there have been some kind of slightly worrying developments, and one of them, as a journalist, I feel obliged to bring up, is the attacks, the burnings of at least four cars belonging to Viesti, the newspaper, one of the main daily newspapers in Podgorica, and I think that should be given some publicity. Mr. Insko, perhaps you will tell us about Bosnia's future, because in general terms the feelings have been not so optimistic about Bosnia, which in recent years has been not going forwards but backwards. Well, okay, well that's enough for me. Everyone's going to speak for about between 5 and 8 minutes, and then let's leave lots of time for questions. And as you can see, this is obviously a kind of popular panel because it's packed, and well, let's, as I say, let's have lots of time for questions and let's make it lively. So, Mr. Jeremic, you're first off. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Good to see you again. Thank you very much for coming. I think that we should be really pleased that we have a participation like this. But I want to start by thanking the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia for organizing this important conference. It has become an important part of the tradition of strategic debate in the Balkans, and it's been always a very helpful contribution. And to also my good friend Samuel Bogar, he visited me, and together with Milan a few days ago in Belgrade, we had a little bit of a reunion. Very much of a Yugospheric reunion at the beginning of this week in Belgrade. And of course I want to thank Telekom Slovenia. They are an important partner. They operate in Serbia, and they were operating very well from everything that we know. I think that we're living in interesting times in the Balkans, and in that sense, we're not exceptions to history. And regional cooperation, which is the name of this panel, I understand, is of course an important element of stability, an important element of how we, first of all, determine and build the trajectory and walk along this trajectory towards the future, hopefully a more prosperous one. But regional relations, the relations between various ethnic groups and countries in this part of the world have throughout history, have depended throughout history a lot on the international relations, on the world affairs. And this is one of these parts of the world that has traditionally been very, very sensitive to international relations at the time. I don't want to turn this into a history lesson, but I think that there are some important elements that I think are worth raising here. And this is that the Western Balkans has traditionally been this place in the middle of the triangle. Tim and I discussed this triangle yesterday, but this historical triangle between the east, west, and the southeast. And the relations in this triangle have usually determined the ways and the atmospherics in this part of the world. I believe that this generation has a historical chance to, break out of this pattern of triangular geopolitics, which, as I said, the region has been subjected to for a very long time. And of course, I say this in the context of the prospect for European integration of the Western Balkans. That would be the breaking of the pattern. And I believe that it would be a tremendous failure if this generation fails to make use of this historical opportunity. I don't think it would be just the failure of the Western Balkans. I think it would be our collective failure in Europe if we're not successful in this process. There's a crisis in Europe. It's real. It is there. I refer to the economic crisis, but this economic crisis is creating political consequences. And one of the policies, one of the aspects of the European presence that is suffering as a result of this crisis is the enlargement policy. And it is difficult to refute that enthusiasm for enlargement, or, if you will, the enthusiasm for the rapidity of the process of enlargement, to say the very least, is going down in certain quarters of Europe. And this is something that we have to deal with. So far, despite all the difficulties, things were moving in the right direction. But I think that, in all honesty, we are soon going to lose an important locomotive in this Western Balkans train. And that locomotive was Croatia. Croatia is going to join very soon the European Union. And in a year and a half from now, Croatia is going to become a member state of the European Union. And then the question is, what next? So, pardon my subjectivity, but I do honestly believe that the integration process of Serbia is a very, very important element in how the Western Balkans is going to move forward after Croatia joins. Serbia is at a delicate stage in the European process. We are awaiting for the candidate status, official candidate to the membership in the European Union, and in December this decision is going to be made. We believe that we are fit to get the candidacy. And I'm very briefly going to say that in the last year, we made significant achievements in Serbia when it comes to closing down the cooperation with The Hague, when it comes to reaching out to our neighbors. I believe that regional cooperation and regional relations in the Western Balkans have actually not been better since the beginning of the war of Yugoslav succession. There are, of course, open issues. There are things that are not very near the final resolution, but I think that even the most difficult things we are trying to handle in Serbia, reverting to exclusively peaceful and diplomatic means. The most complicated and most difficult one, of course, is the issue of Kosovo, but there we have proved time and again that we are prepared to address issues, not to hide away from the issues, but to address issues inside a process using exclusively peaceful and diplomatic means. And since we did mention history a couple of times here, I did. I want to emphasize one important aspect of what I just said, and that is that this is the first time in the history of the Balkans that somebody is trying to resolve an issue of this gravity and complexity using exclusively peaceful means. And I want to say that this government of Serbia is going to stick to this attitude with some very firm views when it comes to the future, including the issue of Kosovo, but we are prepared to work with our partners in the region and beyond the region so that this is resolved in a mutually acceptable way. I think it would be a big mistake to front-load Serbia's accession process with difficult conditionality that is outside the Copenhagen set. I believe that would probably bring about a paralysis of the European process for Serbia. Paralysis creates vacuum, and vacuum creates a stoppage. But stoppage is just an illusion. In the Balkans, history teaches us there is no standstill. You can move either forward or backward. You can't stay still. And moving backward in the context of the Balkans means moving backward into a very dangerous territory. And I want to assure you that the Serbian government is going to do everything that is in its power to prevent things from sliding back. We're going to do everything that we can. And I also want to say it in another way. We're not going to do things that we can't. But short of those things that we can't, we're going to do everything else. We have a firm view of the only prosperous future for the Western Balkans being a European future. We're going to keep working hard, regardless of difficulties and regardless of obstacles, so that this future actually comes about into existence. I think I moved beyond those 8 minutes, but not too many, right?
No, that's fine. Well, thank you. Thanks very much. And
we had an experience of yesterday's panel that actually went on and on and on. So.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, thank you very much indeed. And as usual, always extremely thought-provoking. As you repeated yesterday, we'll do the things that we won't do the things that we can't, but we'll do everything we can to do the things that we will. So I'm sure that there will be plenty of questions about what you can't do or what you can do later on, but I will leave that to everybody in the audience. Okay, well, next, Mr. Rochan, Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Integration. And as I heard you speaking yesterday, it was interesting that you pointed out that you had been at the Thessalonica summit in 2003, the Zagreb summit. So in a sense, you have that historical perspective. Anyway, so over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning. I will speak Montenegrin. Montenegrin language is the youngest language in the world. And we have translation into English.
As Tim said, and Walk repeated, we came from the Balkans straight into Europe. We flew into it. Yesterday we were together in Belgrade at an excellent conference. And I dare say, rhetorically speaking, we don't distinguish rhetorics in the Balkans from that in the EU countries. You know, we are a small country. Yesterday I spoke about that. We are a small geographic pin on the map of Balkan, small spot in the map of Balkan. And we are aware no one will look through the fingers when it comes to us. No one would let us go away without doing everything we have to, without doing our homework. But primarily, I want to thank our hosts, Slovenians, our dear colleague and friend, Minister Šbogar, for organizing this event. I was eager to come, and when I read the moderator's name, there I came here eagerly, even more, because I know Mr. Judah is an expert in the Balkan issues, his name in the field. And of course, having in mind our host Slovenians, I am aware that they know much better about the situation in the Balkans, and I wanted to hear from them what is the way forward, what is next for the Balkans. And I wanted to hear from them about the dynamics to follow. The path, the trajectory to the EU is ever more difficult. That has been proven by the Croatian trajectory, but we who used to be together in former Yugoslavia, that is how we view the things from Podgorica, regardless of conditions being more and more difficult, it would be easier for us than to Slovenia and Croatia, because when they started accession process, they didn't have the friends as we do in Slovenians and Croatians. We have them, and they will help us. Montenegro has made a historic leap, and today in Montenegro, Montenegro is perceived as the country of the good news in the Balkans. How did we make it, and how did we make the leap? Primarily because all our neighbors and other countries at large that have been through the transition process, they are all helping us, and that is privilege. Privilege to learn from the mistakes of others, from those who want to share the experience they had in history. We are just before. We hope that we will soon get the date for negotiations, and you know the conditions have changed regarding the benchmarks. The benchmarks for starting and closing negotiations, and we got the negotiations much before the negotiations started, actually, and we are working very diligently on meeting the conditions articulated by the European Commission, and we work day and night. And we hired and engaged all our potentials and capacities, and we worked closely with the Commission, with our partners from Brussels, because we believe that what we've done, the track record, will recommend us for, make us eligible for getting the date for negotiations, and we believe that the Commission will give positive opinion, and we believe that the European Council will give the date, will have the date for starting the negotiations with Montenegro. For us, what matters more is the process itself, rather than just the dates. Even if it weren't for the EU, even if it weren't for that strategic goal, any modern state, any other states, emancipated modern states have to build institutions, the rule of law, adopt modern civilizational standards in Europe and in democratic world in general, and it will be much easier to do that together with our EU partners than alone. You know, we understand that Europe is much busy about some other urgent issues, and President Rompuy referred to that. And it's not the first time that Europe faces crises, all sorts of them. But this project of EU has demonstrated vitality because of that continuous dialogue and search for solutions in responses to different challenges. We in Montenegro do not worry about those EU concerns because we know that Europe can handle those interior concerns without us. So far in the Balkans, we were in the focus whenever we were a problem. Look now at the agendas of all EU leaders coming to Balkans. They always come first to those places where they have open issues, unsolved issues. But I believe that today, when fortunately for us and not for the world, there are, fortunately for us, but unfortunately for the world, there are much more difficult problems. And we cannot appeal to Brussels by creating more of problems, but by trying to do what we are supposed to do. And I refer to Mr. Rompuy's words, that is, that the enlargement policy remains at the top of EU agenda. Will we use that opportunity? Depends only on us. We cannot appeal to Brussels, I repeat, by generating problems, but only if we make progress and with a spirit of commonality and unison and understanding that we are closest to each other and that we cannot appeal to anyone as competent partners without being partners among ourselves. How can we convince others that we are partners if we cannot be partners, credible partners with each other, with good relations? And if we cannot do that with our neighbors, we cannot appeal to others. We are a small multi-ethnic country, and regarding stability, we have the role that much outweighs our size and our territory and population number. I could speak about this if you were patient to listen to me till tomorrow. I could be speaking incessantly about that. Then you would regret that you are not Montenegrin and you don't live in Montenegro. But when you listen to representatives of opposition and some NGOs and media, then you might get an information that is the worst the incumbency in Europe, that Montenegro is the worst country in the Balkans. But the truth is somewhere in the middle. Most probably. We are not a country without problems. For a small country such as Montenegro, there are no small problems at all. For small Montenegro, It's great honor when it commands good relations with Germany, with big countries in Europe, with Russia, then with China. But we are pursuing realistic policies and politics, and we are interested to learn from small successful countries, from small administrations, how to be able to take up all challenges when we are so small. It's easy for Serbia, the superpower compared to Montenegro. One Montenegrin has to work as much as 100 Serbs. Of course, if you don't help us, we will have to. Thank you, Tim, for asking the question. So to say, embarrassing question, very embarrassing for us regarding the independent daily beast and their cars being set to fire. I used to be a journalist. That is why I'm so clever. And I know you should know one thing, and that is that I highly appreciate the role of media and changes. I believe a French officer in 17th century said, "Give me the press and you take the army and the police." We know that without independent media, without creating conditions for the flourishing of freedoms, you cannot hope to get any progress on the European path. I had opportunity to speak publicly of that event, and our government strongly condemned this vandalism. But when you try to logically understand it, then you should know that someone who doesn't want to see the progress of Montenegro could do that. And in the Balkans, we were never short of such persons. But what I can assure you is that the authorities in Montenegro will do everything they can to use all capacities they have to try to prosecute the criminals and the culprits. So far in our countries, we've made some historic changes in our legislation when it comes to the criminalization of defamation. We are one of the few countries in Europe that has done so. Our most significant experience and success, so to say, when we worked on those 7 conditions, and I repeated that in Belgrade yesterday, is that we have provided ownership of the process, and the fact that now the government and all branches of power, all institutions and parliamentary parties, together with opposition, of course, NGOs, social partners, civil society and media are together on board of that. And for small populations like we have in Montenegro, it is very important. And we need to have on board in this process the whole brain, all of the brains in Montenegro. And we believe we believe that we are very clever.
Thank you very much indeed. And, let's go straight on. In general terms, the European officials like to talk about the regatta process, which brings to mind elegant yachts moving forward. And if the Montenegrin and Serbian yachts have been moving forward, the yachts from Albania and Bosnia-Herzegovina certainly haven't been. And I think the yacht from Bosnia-Herzegovina hasn't moved on since the April package of 2005, but 5 or 4. No one can even remember. Anyway, so over to you, Mr. Insko, the High Representative in Sarajevo.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm happy to contradict you a little bit because it was a very happy week for Bosnia-Herzegovina this week. Yesterday is a new European Union Special Representative and partly my successor, because I was also, until recently, until August, I was European Union Special Representative. He presented his credentials. He gave his first press conference, Peter Sørensen. We also have a new chief of OSCE, Fletcher Burton. These are all old hands in the Balkans. Everybody has served at least 3 times there or 4 times. And I have also now, in a way, a new role because I'm High Representative only, so I can concentrate on Dayton. Also, there was some indications that the government formation is inching towards a more positive development, because, as you know, on 3rd of October there will be an anniversary since we had the elections in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we don't have yet a state government. But we have now some good signals. In overall, I must say that for the last 16 years after Dayton, there was positive developments in the Balkans. Vuk Jeremić once even said we have the best regional situation now for 20 years. Yeah, for 20 years. Everybody is now closer to European Union. Of course, Croatia is closest, and Slovenia, which is not a Balkan country, but which has a huge responsibility and experience with the Balkans, is already a member state and is in the Eurozone. So it's not a question if these countries will be in the European Union, but the question is when. Tim, when we got instructions for this meeting today, we were supposed to give 2 key messages and to ask 1 question. So my first key message is that the international community still has an ongoing responsibility in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I'm especially speaking about this country. Of course, this ongoing responsibility is shifting. If I give you just 2 examples, IFOR and SFOR troops in Bosnia-Herzegovina after Dayton had 60,000 members, yeah? And my office had 800 civil servants and staff members. Now the troop is down to below 1,500, yeah? And in my office we have some 150 staff members instead of 800. So the role is shifting, but there is still an ongoing responsibility in the region. I would compare it a little bit with my own country, Austria, where we had foreign troops and liberators for about 10 years, from 1945 to 1955. And when these troops were sure that Nazism would not come back, when they were sure democracy has settled, they just left Austria in the year 1955. And by coincidence, it was the same day as many years later as Slovenia, 26th of October, we were free of foreign troops. Yeah? It's a coincidence, it was a nice coincidence between 2 neighboring countries. Yeah? So I think there is a moral and political obligation still to stay there for some time, but of course in a shifting in a different way. We had the Marshall Plan also in Europe in '45. Bosnia also has something similar, but of course times are changing and we cannot do eternally their job. So I come now to my second message. There must also be a domestic responsibility, which is obvious, but especially a domestic vision in the region. We see it is in Serbia, in Montenegro, there is a strong sense of purpose, a strong sense of urgency. I wish we would have also this strong sense of purpose and strong sense of urgency in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and this is maybe the next task of the new government, really to accelerate issues. The local leaders have to respond to the question, where would we like to be in 2020? Yeah? The international community made an offer. The doors are open, not only for the citizens who can travel now freely, they are welcome in Europe, also Bosnia-Herzegovina and the region is also welcome in Europe. I asked this question 100 young people, 100 young, not NGO representatives, which are also a very important part of the society in the Balkans and in Bosnia, but I asked this question 100 young professionals. And in 3 weeks only, they gave 100 answers what their vision of Bosnia-Herzegovina is. And it was not about being a Serb, being a Croat, being a Bosniak, or being one of the 16 members of the nations which still live in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It was about the future of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And believe me, Bosnia has vast resources, vast natural resources, but also vast human resources, which are even bigger than the natural resources. You all know who the best movie makers are. Many of them come from Bosnia, football players. They have vast natural resources as far as water is concerned, solar power. And I see there a bright future for the region in clean energy, in renewable energy. And if these countries are working together. Milan Roche mentioned several times Montenegro is a small country. We all are small countries, but if we live together, if we work together, we are a huge region. Yeah? Like Davutoglu told me recently, Thessaloniki was a huge regional port, say 100, 200 years ago. But if Thessaloniki works only for Greece, it's a small port. If it works for the region, it's a huge center and a huge port. And this is also the case for Bar, for many other areas and places. If we are a region, then the Balkans are 55 million people, and this is something to invest. I will not to invest in a country with 2 million, with 600,000, but if I invest somewhere for the region, it pays. So, international responsibility and also local responsibility. And my question to you would be, how do you see the vision for the region? With this I would end.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of difficult questions for you later on. It used to be that economics was classed as the dismal science, but I think in today's world, economics, which might have been classed as low politics before, is now high politics. So I'm hoping that Mr. Fischer, the Vice President for Operational Policies for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, is going to tell us about the future and the economic future of the region. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here with you and sitting at this panel with full audience in front of me. And if you allow, I will be speaking more in economic terms than political. And don't worry, that will be could be said, promotion of my institution, which I would like to bring here. I will be a little bit more contemplative anyway, speaking about the challenges of this region, of course, based on the findings and experience we have exercised in this region during the last years when the bank was acting in this region. I mean, very actively. The title of this panel is "What is next for the Balkans?" But speaking about the next steps, about the future, it needs to have two things on mind: something from the past and some feelings about the context. I start with the context, as it was mentioned several times, and the crisis was the most frequent word, I think, during these debates in this event in Bled. The economic circumstances are uneasy, turbulent. There is a lot of problems with the shaking financial markets. We are talking about the debt crisis, the austerity measures, and very tightened measures in the field of fiscal policy are on the table in the most European states. The crisis, we are talking about the double dip crisis, all expectations about this, something like upswing or the very easy outcome from the crisis, that's something which is now considered as a rubbish. We are facing the very sluggish recovery, no upswing, no dreaming about the coming back to the indicators which we were witnessed before crisis, 6, 8, 3% of the GDP growth. So that's in the realm of dreams, and let's forget it. The crisis changed the landscape and the picture of the global economy, shifting the centers of the economy somewhere else from Europe. Europe is not winner. It's not winner of this crisis or after crisis. Rather loser, and the ill continent, which has to think over what to do further on, and there was a lot of very fresh ideas expressed yesterday. at a political level, we have to speak also in terms of economy, how to go on. And now we are dealing with some very tangible problems like the crisis of the current common currency and so on and so forth, and at the same time postponing, I think, the two most difficult and complicated and very heated challenges we are facing in this continent and the European Union. That's energy first, energy infrastructure, energy security, diversification of the energetic sources. And the second issue is, if you allow me, aging of this badly, quickly aging continent, which is the problem connected with migration, with a lot of social, political, and also economic implications. Now, there are the two things which are a little bit postponed in our debates on the European level. So that's the context. That's the context. Going back to the pre-crisis period in this region, the figures were very convincing, shining, glittering, very nice. But the problem, as anywhere in Europe, but the problem was some kind of lack of, could be said, long-term vision of the sustainable growth in this region. And as a lifetime statistician, I can tell you that we cannot limit only to observe or interpret the figures on GDP as a whole, but also look at the structure. And looking at the expenditure side of GDP, it was pretty clear in the pre-crisis period in this region that it was clearly domestic consumption-driven growth, not a growth driven by export and not a growth driven by investments. And that's the vulnerable growth and the growth which potentially could go to the disequilibrium, imbalanced growth, and the crisis is something which exposes it very clearly and in very gloomy way. And it happened. So the first thing is the how to improve the conditions in this region for the healthy growth and the good recovery. And now I can tell you about some could be said issues and findings which we got from the survey which we regularly organize with World Bank. This is the so-called BEPS, the Business Environment and Enterprise Performance Survey. And based on the findings of this survey, the perception of households, local entrepreneurs and foreign investors as concerns the general conditions in economy, no wonder is clear. The problems in tax administration, level of corruption, and the very slow work of courts in this region. That's nothing surprising, but it's something very serious, which has to be sorted out. The second issue is more macroeconomic, and this is the enhancing the exportability of the countries within the region, and the general speaking not only about in terms of export figures, but I'm speaking about the openness, level of openness of economy of this region, which is lower compared with, for instance, with Central Europe. We usually measure the openness economy summing up the total volume of exports and imports divided by GDP figure. And for Eastern and South and East of Europe, it varies from 40 to 80% compared with Central Europe countries, including our hosts in Slovenia, it's exceeding 100%. So that's the potential which hasn't been used so far, export potential of the economy and openness of the economy. The third thing is which is very connected with what I have been talking about. That's the enhancing of the competitiveness of countries of this region. Speaking about competitiveness, I'm on mind the knowledge-based economy, education, research and development, and better relationships between science and industry. I can tell you when I met for the first time, when I met the Western Balkan ambassadors in London for the first time, we have an excellent lunch talk in London, and I can tell you 80% was dedicated to education, innovations, and so on and so forth. Not about could be said, a general, or not about infrastructure, energy, or something like climate changes and something like that. Just about education, research and development, conditions, how to develop it, how to enhance it in this region. So that's very good. It's very easy to have a very nice chat about that, sitting in some London embassy and talking about around the table. That's very difficult to do it practically. And I perfectly know what I'm talking about as the former Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. I'm aware of the complications of this issue, of this stuff. It's complicated to reach the reforms, to achieve the reforms, to reform this. On the other hand, that's something we are facing, which is knocking at the door. And speaking about education, I haven't got on mind only the tertiary or the university level of the education. I have on mind the whole system, starting with the pupil, with the basic schools, via secondary schools, up to the university. University education system, which is very positive, and it sounds very clearly from Western Balkan states, and it has been presented here, and this is the tendency which my institution supports very strongly. That's the cross-border and regional cooperation between countries, or region-wide projects in infrastructure, I don't know what. This is important in energy, transportation, and so on and so forth, that the projects are not limited to one country. This is something which hasn't got only it's signaling something more than economic or technical issue. That's something much, much more, and even more than political issue. That's the signal about the values in this region, and this is very important thing. Going back to the innovation and the innovation potential and how to fund this process, usually everyone relies on the state, omnipotential state, and with coming with the hands, but that's what we don't know how to organize it. I'm not speaking about this region, but in general, how to enhance the role and involvement of the private sector in funding of science, technology, progress in technologies, and innovation process. So I will stop on that. I think that is area for a lot of questions from the audience, which I'm ready to.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that clear presentation of what needs to be done. And now we're going to have a view, as is only right and just, from Slovenia. Professor Aleš Debeljak, the Faculty of Social Sciences in Ljubljana. Open to you. Over to you.
Thank you. It's an honor, pleasure to share some of my thoughts about the region with the distinguished panel. That, however, I've noticed is united in the optimism of will. Allow me to add pessimism of reason. Why there is such an intractable problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina in particular? Because Bosnia and Herzegovina in particular is the last remain of what the Balkans traditionally stood for. all of this talk today, we talk about the Balkans, coming and going from the Balkans and so on. This really does not do historical justice to what the Balkans stood for. What did the Balkans stand for? It was since 1808 when the German cartographer followed in the footsteps of the Turkish anonymous Turkish cartographer, having given the name to the region. But it was since that time that it clearly became evident that the region is characterized by a tremendous diversity in historical sense as well as in contemporary sense. So the conundrum, the amalgamation, the overflowing, the cross-pollination of various ethnic, religious, linguistic communities that have lived on a relatively limited space have contributed to the term the Balkans. It is true, of course, that Chancellor Metternich of Imperial Austria has famously said that the Balkans begins south of the Landstrasse, that is, entire region between the southern suburbs of Vienna and Thessaloniki and Istanbul, is really the realm of the wild, of the savages, as it were. But it is likewise true that today people from all the Balkan countries come on the buses, getting off in Vienna at the central bus station, which is only a stone throw away from the salon in which the Chancellor has uttered those ominous words. Yet, the region of the savagery seems to be the moniker under which a member of international, particularly Western public opinion, continues to see the Balkans. But very few people have understood that the contradiction that contributes to the intractable problems in multicultural, multinational, and multi-confessional polities such as Bosnia and Herzegovina, to a lesser extent Macedonia. The rest of the countries have, particularly since the breakup of Yugoslavia, which in turn was half suicide, half murder, but since the breakup of Yugoslavia, have all the regions, or all the countries, the nation states that have emerged out of the ashes of the destroyed Yugoslavia, have striven, have been motivated to emulate the European pattern. And what was the European pattern? It is the nation state. Since early 19th century, it is the nation state that becomes the dominant ideology how to organize a collective. And the process of for each and every ethnic community to possibly, in an ideal case scenario, acquire the instruments of the sovereign political will, that is, the nation state, have followed in the footsteps of the European historical example. I know very well that no, that's not how we meant, what the West Europeans said, but it is true that in the absence, in the 1980s, after the death of Tito, the erstwhile president of late Federation of Yugoslavia, there was precious few visionary projects that would maintain the trans-ethnic quality that held the polity formerly known as Yugoslavia together. Now, this sort of trans-ethnic ideology is at work in the larger European realm, is it not? Diversity in unity. I've never found a person who would successfully explain what does that slogan stand for. But it is likewise, just as the trans-ethnic ideology that held, as I said, former Yugoslavia together, brotherhood and unity, both the European and the former Yugoslav trans-ethnic slogan represent the screen upon which we project our own fears and our own desires. So no wonder that there was a discrepancy between the East, what one can say, East European pattern in general and the Balkan pattern in particular. And that is the acquisition of a nation state, very much in keeping with what the 19th century West European model has unearthed and put on the table. And the contradiction, of course, is that the Balkans as it used to be known, that is, for its diversity, for its Kop Macedoni, one of the symbolic markers of this conundrum, of this amalgamated identities, is caught between the rock and the hard place, between the Scylla of the nation state and the Charybdis of the normative life in the multitudes, be it cultural, confessional, and linguistic. Both are European demands. One is to have a nation state as the expression of the political sovereignty, and on the other to have the multicultural, multi-confessional, multi-whatnot structure in the society at large. So hence the contradiction. No wonder that then the Balkans can best be known for the region where people don't, when they have a toothache, don't go see a dentist, but simply pull the tooth out. Because that is something that has been de rigueur on the governmental level and on the supranational levels across the region that we very well know has been engulfed in the incomparable destruction. And out of this, now what comes? Provisionally seven nation states out of the former Yugoslavia, 7 nation states that are at odds with each other very often, barely viable on their own, and yet they would need to cooperate, trans-regional cooperation, transnational cooperation in the name of growth. But what are they facing is not only the governments that but also the people, the populace at large. They are facing numerous walls where before there haven't been any. So no wonder that the efforts of intellectuals, writers, poets, and essayists, much as they have in the figure of Radovan Karadzic and numerous others, contributed to fanning the flames of the war 20 years ago. But today, the effort that I participate in, and I'll briefly bore you with this for 2 more minutes, is one of those edifices that takes the bricks. No wonder that we publish a magazine in a form of a brick. We take the bricks out of the walls, dividing the people's communities and polities, and built out of these bricks the bridge that is, in this case, a Sarajevo Notebooks, a magazine that I helped together with 6 former Yugoslav intellectuals establish in the early 2000s in order not to throw the baby out together with the bathwater, not to, after the disintegration of Yugoslavia was more or less complete, after the Dayton Agreement froze the conditions of war that dominated the region in the last decade of the preceding century, trying to facilitate the dialogue between the non-nationalist, non-exclusivist writers, intellectuals, poets, and essayists who, on the pages of the magazine that is published in Serbo-Croatian, regardless of a number of regional variations and nominations under which this language is known, we publish in Latin script. But we cast our net far and wide. And we do not only bring in the former Yugoslav writers, but we have successfully turned Sarajevo Notebooks into a showcase for the best writing from the region and beyond, trying to indicate in this minuscule manner the possibilities of dialogue, the possibilities of a trans-border and trans-ethnic dialogue that is the sine qua non of any sort of future that we want to pursue together. However, in this neck of the woods, even the future is not what it used to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You talked about unity and diversity. Well, we're unified on the panel, but you've heard a lot of diverse points of view in addressing diverse subjects. Okay, well, we're going to throw it open to the floor, and everyone should just say who they are and who they represent, if they represent anyone. And I can see that the first question will come from the ambassador of Japan.
Thanks very much, coordinator. This is a very, very interesting discussion here. I want to contribute from Asian, Japan, to this session. Since the Japan government has decided to dispatch the panelists here, the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, unfortunately, due to the political situation, minister changed, then also prime minister changed, and then he has to be in Tokyo. That's why with cooperation with the kindness with the Secretariat, we distribute a text of speech, what he wants to address. And please look at the later stage in the table. And if you look at the bilateral relationship, Western Balkan and Japan, recently, March 11, we had a huge disaster, tsunami and earthquake. And we very much appreciate your and heartfelt thanks to the people and the government of West Balkan countries to the donation and sympathy to us. We felt Japan is not the single. We are not alone. As such, Japan is always looking for the West Balkan situation. Since 1990s, Japan has devoted every effort to making contribution humanitarian aid, economic reconstruction, $1.5 billion US. And then also, not only to that, through the technical assistance and grant aid and loans as well. And in addition to that, after the conflict, we try to save your life. It means through the ITF, Slovenia has established the mining activities. We $101 million contributed to the mining. At the same time, 2 years, we have contributed €500,000 to also the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Croatia as such. So we are thinking about the West Balkans' political instability is directly affect to the Asian all over the world situation. So we are very much keen about how progress here. That's why we are continue to watch the level of toward the democracy and taking into account the level of the economic situation. We continue to support, and you are not alone. Don't feel you are alone. We are supporting from Japan. Thank you very much. And I think my Minister Yermich, and you have been in Japan just before the tsunami disaster, and also Inchiko has also been in Japan in last month. So I hope you have some contribution of international cooperation. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Stand up and tell us who you are.
I have a laptop on my lap, so I'm not going to get up. I'll present myself. Goran Zdjukovic, STA, Slovenian Press Agency. A question for Mr. Jeremic. Perhaps a slightly provocative question to his slightly provocative statement. You said Serbia was not going to do anything it can't. Although tempting, I don't want to ask you what it is that Serbia can't do, because I find it more interesting that your sentence was in the future tense. Serbia will do this, Serbia won't do that. I would like to ask what it is that Serbia has been doing, and especially what it is doing now. We know that stalemate in Bosnia has been going on for years. It is nearly 3 years since Kosovo declared independence. We have seen the flaring up of violence at border crossings recently. How much longer can this go on before we get to a point where it might get too late to do anything? Thank you.
I wonder whether it might be a good idea to gather, let's say, three questions, and then we'll come to... I'm sorry? Well, I did ask the gentleman to stand up, but he asked me... So, can you just repeat your name and who you're from?
Slovenian Press Agency.
From the Slovenian Press Agency. Okay, we need one next question. Gentleman over there.
Hvala lijepo. My name is Mirko
Pejanovic, and I come from the University of Sarajevo, Faculty of Political Sciences. I came here together with 20 students from Bosnia and Herzegovina who took part in a separate panel on the future of Balkans and discussed it as they see them in their own eyes. I would like to comment on the regarding European integration trajectory in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the fact that it came to the standstill, and how to eliminate barriers. I could do that. I could speak about that, but I will give up the idea, and I want to thank Mr. Inzko, who represents Bosnia and Herzegovina as the only representative, governmental representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And as we don't have the government, I want to thank my colleague for mentioning Sarajevo's notebooks as one kind of our cooperation and promotion of our cooperation. As of September this year, European Union had the project of post-Dayton development of Bosnia and Herzegovina, where international community articulated its role, and we now have its special representative. Mr. Sorensen will be the special representative, so we won't have only OHR representative who will have to do both, to act in two capacities. But instead we will have two separate persons, and one who will be dealing with the EU institutions and who will represent EU institutions and work on our EU path, and we hope he will speed up the process in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I will ask Mr. Inzko about whether he believes that he will help speed up the process and how he sees the prospects of Bosnia and Herzegovina's future accession path. I ask this question because of my students, because integrations would help Bosnia and Herzegovina build institution and help stabilize the region as a whole.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks very much. We're going to have one more question, but I'm going to make a little rule here. Can we just no statements? Can we just keep the statements to a minimum and just have some questions, because there'll be lots of questions, and then as many people as possible can get in there. We're going to have one more question. The ambassador of the British ambassador.
Thank you very much, Tim. Andrew Page, British ambassador in Slovenia. My question concerns regional cooperation. I was very struck a year or two ago when the Brdo process got underway between Slovenia and Croatia, that the impetus behind that was to get the countries of the former Yugoslavia plus Kosovo and Albania together in a way that tries to help them all to resolve their problems of the past, the legacy problems, and indeed present this region as something that can really have a big contribution towards Europe and not be a variety of problems to resolve. And it's made some headway, and I'd be interested in the panel's reaction to that. But my question really is there and has there been too great a proliferation of different organizations, different regional organizations designed to try and help this part of the world, so that in an ideal world you wouldn't really start from here? What can be done about that? There's an enormous kind of fund of goodwill towards your region of countries wanting to help. But it strikes me that that proliferation of regional organizations is hindering and not helping. And what should the future be to try to improve regional cooperation so that you can attract the foreign investment you need, you can get the more open economies you need, because you're dealing in a very difficult and competitive economic world. And it strikes me that you really need to start with improved regional cooperation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think we've got 3 questions there from the Slovenian press agency. Well, that was directed at Mr. Jeremic. Perhaps you'd like to come back on that. Let's keep everything sort of quite brief so we can sort of keep everything moving. Then there was a question for Mr. Insko, and I'm not quite sure who would like to pick up on the question of, well, perhaps you, Mr. Fisher, you would like to pick up on the British ambassador's question? Okay, well, first of all, over to you, Mr. Yeremin.
Well, I understand that the first question was, what is it that Serbia has done, if I wrote it down well? Well, I think that I'm just going to speak on behalf of this government of Serbia. I'm not going to go back into history. But having set our goals and having declared our convictions and having won the elections a few years ago, I'd like to emphasize that the regional cooperation and reaching out to neighbors and trying to resolve the open issues of the past that we had inherited from the past was one of the top priorities for the Serbian government. And I can maybe just mention a few things which I believe are very, very important. As a result of the efforts of this government, the cooperation with the Hague Tribunal is now largely a matter of the past for Serbia. There are no more indictees at large. And when we're speaking about war crimes, I'd also like to remind everybody of President Tadić's efforts aimed at reconciliation with neighbors and the hard work that he has done in pushing forward the resolution on Srebrenica, for example, in the Serbian parliament. That was a historical document, and that was historical for Europe. This was the first time I understand that a democratically elected parliament de facto passed an apology about anything that took place in the European space throughout the European history. And as we know, the European history is full of those occurrences, which I believe require some kind of contrition. Yet Serbia's parliament was the first one in European history to do that. There's an improvement of the situation in our relations with Croatia. It also has to do with being brave in addressing the issue of war crimes when it comes to the Serbian officials. I refer to President Tadić first and foremost. Also, when it comes to Kosovo, I think that we are perhaps too often discounting the fact that this issue is being resolved using largely peaceful and diplomatic means. When I say largely peaceful and diplomatic means, of course, I can't say fully peaceful and diplomatic means because there's a party to this process that's not always using exclusively peaceful and diplomatic means. And I refer to the use of force and to the threats of the use of force that are coming out of certain quarters even in the last few days. Serbia is going to stay committed to resolving the issue of Kosovo peacefully and diplomatically. And this is the first time in the history of this region that it is exclusively peaceful and diplomatic means that are being used to resolve an issue of this gravity. It's a real problem. It's a problem not to be discounted or dismissed all so easily. It's a very, very difficult problem of the precedent that may be followed by others if a lot is stand. We want to make sure that through negotiations, a solution is found to the problem of Kosovo that all parties can subscribe to and that can be confirmed in the multilateral space, first and foremost in the framework of the United Nations. We're going to keep doing that. Development of economic ties is also a thing that I believe Tim mentioned at the beginning. Not every country in the Yugosphere is as open to foreign direct investment from other parts of the Yugosphere as Serbia is today. You're referring to the Croatian supermarkets or Atlantic Group distribution, but you know, the second largest supermarket chain in Serbia is actually Croatian chain Idea. Not every country in the Yugosphere is as open as Serbia is. And I count here the entire Yugosphere. And last but not least, we are working patiently towards resolving the issue of war crimes related to some of the war crimes that have actually not been covered by the work of the Hague Tribunal. And I want here to refer to the monstrous accusations for human organs harvesting and trafficking contained in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe report by Senator from Switzerland, Dick Marty. We still haven't seen any progress whatsoever in the investigation, yet we are patient and we are working together with our international partners. And just briefly, when you say what we can do, we cannot go against our constitution and the democratic will of the Serbian people. That's what we can do, because we're not allowed to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I can't emphasize enough, it's important to keep this thing moving, so please be brief.
I'll be very brief. Thank you, His Excellency, Ambassador of Japan. I was indeed 2 weeks ago there. They have invested $500 million in Bosnia alone, and if you come to Sarajevo, you will see yellow buses everywhere. It's the same yellow color as in Tokyo. So there is international solidarity, and also Japan is playing an important role in my steering board in the Peace Implementation Council. So, arigato, thank you very much for your contribution. As far as proliferation of regional organization is concerned, it really appears that you are right, Ambassador. But I think as long as they bring an added value, they are welcome. But if they are a burden, they should be closed down immediately. Yeah. One of such organizations we have established 12 years ago, the Stability Pact, you know, it worked fantastically. And I remember at this time, this was still a time of Dr. Tudjman, who was personally at the conference. And I'm not comparing the both, but there was also Milosevic still around. And there you can see in 12 years what tremendous changes we have made. Today we have Josipovic and Tadic. And it's really a change of paradigm, and maybe also a lift of paradigm. But also there are some regional organizations or international organizations, as I told you, which are reducing their presence, like my office from 800 to 150, like the soldiers from 60,000 to 1,500. Yeah. But we have always to ask ourselves on a daily basis, what is our purpose? Yeah, what is our purpose? As far as European Union is concerned, Professor Pejanovic, I think we have now a new chapter in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We have now a new constellation. We have now new people with OSCE, especially with European Union, Mr. Peter Sørensen. I'm High Representative only now, and I think we must do the maximum out of it. There will be a lot of coordination, there will be a lot of synergy, and we will support each other. And the task is not to have a strong European Union, which we wish, of course, or a strong OHR or a strong OSCE. The task is to have a better Bosnia. This is our main purpose, and you will see some good results already in the future months. The main issue should be for Bosnia, for the new government as well, and for the international community, how to put Bosnia on the fast track. And I see 3 areas where Bosnia and the region could be on the fast track, because there are thousands of questions, and we know what Balkan means sometimes. For me, it's also culture, it's sports, you know, it's tourism, not only problems. But I see 3 areas. First of all, accelerated highway towards Brussels, which means towards EU, towards NATO, and thirdly also an accelerated highway in the area of economy.
Okay, thanks for being brief. Mr. Fischer and then Mr. Rochen. Mr. Fischer was saying to, and then Mr. Rochen.
Okay, just I'll try to be very brief. First, one word drop to Japan. Japan is one of the EBRD's shareholders, very proactive, and we are pretty aware of your very good and positive role your country plays here, so highly appreciated. So that's seen from London. And then the regional cooperation, how to enhance it, and so on and so forth. The EBRD is the bank which invested more than €1 billion in this region in the previous year, and of course, that's a pretty good portion of this money was channeled to infrastructure projects for transportation infrastructure, energy infrastructure, which have the interregional or regional-wide character by definition, despite of, besides the project devoted to the municipal sector and so on and so forth. The issue is how to concentrate ourselves to enhance this way of this direction of the cooperation and to change it into the very concrete projects. We don't invest ourselves. We also administer, or we are participating in administration in multi-donor funds or facilities. Western Balkan Investment Framework, one of them, Neighborhood Investment Fund, that's the other. So we are ready to play the active role and to support, together with our European Commission colleagues, to be focused much more to regional cooperation or regional-wide projects. What we would like to do, and everybody sitting in this room is cordially invited, next year we will organize the Western Balkan Investment Conference, not for individual countries, which was used before, now for the whole region in London, in our premises, in spring, drawing the investors, foreign investors, high-level or high-ranked persons, high-ranked authorities from the individual countries, people from business and from financial and banking sector. And I think the central issue and central topic which we would like to concentrate to is this issue of the regional-wide cooperation. So, Ambassador, you are cordially welcome to use this opportunity to visit London again, your native country, and see you there, if not sooner.
Mr. Rochin, it's over to you.
Thank you. I'll be very brief in my comments. I'll pick up on what Mr. Fischer said. I want... records. We had 100,000 euros, 100 million euros of projects in Montenegro, which is great when it comes to the state of size of Montenegro. And I want to thank them for catering for and being sensitive to the needs of Montenegrin society. I support the initiative of Professor Debelak that Professor Debelak talked about. It is a good process, and I want to correct something and to make a statement about the nation states in the Balkans, at least when it comes to Montenegro. It's not true, and it cannot stand the argument. Why not? Što nije tačno? Što nije tačno onome što sam rekao? I will tell you. It's not true that we created nation states. We are known as multi-ethnic society that opened door to all refugees from the former Yugoslavia, Serbs from Bosnia, Muslims from Bosnia, Serbs from Kosovo, Roma and Albanians from Kosovo, and we are known as multi-ethnic state where Montenegrins, Serbs, Muslims, Albanians, Croats live in harmony. When it comes to Montenegro should give consideration to the fact maybe this is you talked about the smallest state and then it's least important when it comes to education, what Mr. Fischer said. It's great to talk about modern technology, modern knowledge and modern education. Without that you cannot hope to progress further. But the situation in the Balkans now is that we should better focus, more focus on education in general. What I have in mind today, we have nationalists in the Balkans who are more of nationalists than their fathers, those 20-year-olds. Old persons. Today, they learn history from the textbooks in which the same persons in one textbook are seen as criminals and in the other as heroes. And I call upon all of you to do something about that. If we don't ourselves look into that problem, if we don't learn something from German, French model, we can hardly speak about European future of Western Balkans, because the new education would be, if we continue this way, it would be like building a villa on rotten foundations. Regarding the regional initiatives, I agree with you. We have lots of conferences where we have fantastic speeches and we fantastically sit there. And it's a great thing that we come to the same table. It used to be a great success to bring everyone at the same table. But now we need to make a step further to see what is it that we can do now to contribute to coming closer to EU integration. Montenegro chaired a couple of very important initiatives. Serbia took over, and I believe that we started regional initiatives on new grounds, and that we are making that integrational focus better, focusing better on that added value. Regarding the regional developments and the role of Serbian Parliament, I want to say that Montenegrin Parliament, much before Serbian Parliament made an apology, and I know that you believe that Serbia is the most open economy. I said, I'm grateful that we are all open towards investments, and without foreign investments foreign investments, you cannot make progress towards membership in the EU. And I want to say that Montenegro has been a leader for long for attracting foreign investment.
Very briefly, my rejoinder will be very brief. I did not refer to whether or not factually there is a minority of one kind or another living in any of the given nation states in the Balkans. Every nation state in Europe, including Iceland since 1980s, has a minority. So there is no ethnically homogeneous state. That is not what I was saying. What I did say, however, is that the logic of a nation state with one language, with one dominant community, and the promulgation of an interest that is largely in the interest, international interest, that largely supports and reflects the dominant ethnic community. And this is the logic of the nation state that has, without exception, rolled over the Balkans since and during the disintegration of Yugoslavia. And why? Because other alternative policies, ideologies of living together, convivenza, under this or another political banner, have been tossed in the waste bin of history. And hence, only the tried and true nationalist formula remained to be used, and it was used in abundance and in wanton way.
Okay, Mr. Rochin, 10 seconds, Mr. Rochin, because there are people who want to ask questions. Come back. You can say it in 10 seconds.
Sekunde.
Yeah.
opet kad je Crna Gora u pitanju. Dakle, radi se o građanskoj državi, nema konstitutivnih naroda u našem ustavu. Službeni jezik je crnogorski, a u službenoj upotrebi su i srpski, i bosanski, i hrvatski. I na tome smo upravo prije nekoliko dana postigli punu saglasnost kroz otvoreni dijalog u našem parlamentu. Htio sam prosto da navedem jedan dobar primjer iz regiona, ne oponirajući tome o čemu vi govorite. Samo da jednostavno imate u vidu, u vašoj percepciji i neke dobre primjere kojih ima, koje možda treba afirmisati i podržati.
I said optimism of will is necessary, but cautious reason likewise kicks in and comes in welcome.
Okay, well, it's good to keep things lively, but let's keep things moving. The lady at the back over there. Okay, but you are, in effect, promising that you're not making a statement and you're going to ask a question.
Okay, I'm Nesmina Trekovska from Macedonia. I'm working at Fon University. I want to just mention that Macedonia is also part of all this, and I'm interested about your opinion. Where is Macedonia in all this? I hope that there is some of power in the future too in our country. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for keeping it brief. Who's next? There's a gentleman over there.
I am Bardasan Papai, teaching at the Law Faculty of Republic of Kosovo, and I wanted to have a question for the panelists. In fact, for the Minister Jeremic, previously he mentioned that he has used, and his government has used all the political and diplomatic means to solve issues, and he enumerated a number of them, and he committed himself and the government that they will continue to do so. And the question would be, do you still think that there are any other diplomatic channels or means left for the Kosovo issue, when you know that there are 82 states that have recognized Kosovo, as well as there are so many channels that you have, and diplomatic means that you have used thus far, without saying what you have used in the past, and the diplomatic means that you are not using, for example, for 2,000 missing persons that nobody knows anything yet from the war. Thank you.
One more question. Okay, there's a gentleman here, yes? Remember, a question, a brief question, not a statement.
Yes, a brief question.
Yeah.
No, just I want to think that the societal dimension of the Balkan situation was underlined by Professor de Villach and by Minister Rocan. But the question I have is, what are we doing about this process of societal exclusion, humiliation, and thus destroying the basic infrastructure, societal infrastructure for development and well-being? What strategies are pursued, what programs, and what investments are being done in societal development? Thank you.
Could you just tell everyone who you are?
Oh, I'm Morten Lichem from Austria.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we've got 3 questions. I'm not quite sure whether anyone is going to want to speak for Macedonia.
Very briefly, I might say that Macedonian writers are part and parcel of an ongoing project, also known as Sarajevo Notebooks magazine. They sit on the editorial board, and the Macedonian writers are, like all the other writers who do not write in the language formerly known as Serbo-Croatian, are legitimately and properly translated into the language in which the magazine is published, other than once a year, the best of Sarajevo Notebooks, which is published in English. But rest assured that Macedonians are in the magazine, a project that flies below the radar of the head honchos, are well represented.
But thank you for bringing up Macedonia. But Mr. Iso, do you want to say something about Macedonia? Or?
No, I'm not authorized to speak about Macedonia, but I know that Macedonia is warmly welcome in the European Union. Of course, there is this name issue. On the other side, we are always quoting in the international community the Ohrid Agreement as a fantastic example how it can be done. Yeah, and Albanians are now fully integrated into the Macedonian government. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting on that point that just in a kind of minor symbolic way, it was interesting how at the Belgrade Forum yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of European Integration from Macedonia, Teuta Arifi, was represented in Belgrade and mentioned her past as a student in Kosovo at the University of Pristina. There was something slightly symbolic about her presence there, and something optimistic for the region in that, and for Macedonia. Mr. Jeremic, question from Kosovo for you.
I think it was a very telling question. I'll repeat the question. Do you still think that there are diplomatic means left? My answer is yes. And that's the whole point of what I was trying to say, that Serbia is trying to resolve open issues through diplomacy. But that is very much, unfortunately, a frame of thinking of the so-called Pristina government, of the Kosovo, so-called Kosovo government. They don't believe, some of them at least, that there aren't any diplomatic means left. And my counter question is like, what is it left then, if not diplomatic means? Wars, preparing armed incursions, as the one that we had seen a few weeks ago, the one that it is openly threatened to be used, and even a date for an armed incursion given, that is September 16. That is the frame of mind which I think we need to work very, very hard together to overcome in the Balkans, not just in the issue of Kosovo. Of course, in Kosovo it's most blatantly obvious that this is the case, but I believe that there are other things that really need more diplomacy, and my answer is, do you still think that the diplomatic means are left is yes, and for all the open and unresolved issues in the Balkans. And talking about societal exclusion and humiliation, you mentioned it, sir, if I remember well. I think that today Kosovo is indeed the darkest hole of the European space when it comes to societal exclusion and humiliation. And you need to go to the ghettos like Velika Hoća, or to some of the desecrated and destroyed churches and monasteries from the 13th and the 14th century that are scattered throughout Kosovo, to see for real what I'm talking about in the 21st century Europe.
Okay, Alice, do you want to pick up that question about social exclusion, or if you're happy not to, we can...
I can only continue beating my own drum, but the project that is cultural in its nature would, one assumes, would invite like-minded people, and yet the sort of exclusion was often, it came up at the editorial board, particularly on the fragile line Albanian Kosovars and Serbian contributors and editors. But that being said, I have to say that the forum for a debate where a lot of, if unpleasant voices can be voiced in impunity, that is already going a long way, and I think that this is what the magazine does.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, next question over there. Remember, I'm sorry, I know that you would like to come back, but we don't have time, and the more voices, the better. Sorry, remember to tell us who you are. And,
Dobar dan,
statements.
ja sam Gordan Balaban, predsjednik Unije studenata Republike Srpske. Želim da postavim jedno pitanje gospodinu Insku, gospodinu Jeremiću i gospodinu Roćenu. U posljednjoj knjizi našeg čuvenog režisera Emira Kusturice stoji jedna rečenica: u Europu se ne ide neraščišćenih računa. Želim iskren odgovor kojeg ćemo svi mi mladi da upamtimo danas i mjerimo vrijeme do 2020. Smatrate li da zemlje jugosfere zaista mogu da raščiste najveći dio tih krupnih računa, da kažem tako, problema, da od 2020. godine možemo da se bavimo nekim pitanjima koja su nama od suštinskog značaja, kao što su ekonomska, socijalna i tako dalje, pitanja tog karaktera, a da se više ne bavimo pitanjima koja su političkog karaktera? Hvala.
So just when you're talking about paying the bill to Europe, are you talking literally financially or in general terms? In general terms. Okay, fine. All right, figuratively. Okay, that's the translation. Fine. Okay, is that Mrs. Licht there? Yes, Sonja Licht from Belgrade.
Sonja Licht, Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence. Since there were a few questions which touched on societal cultural issues, including the role of culture, art, education, civil society, which are very, very often mentioned when we talk about regional cooperation, for example, but less often really practiced. I would like to ask the participants about an event which I thought could be a watershed. Just 8 days ago, there was a summit of the leaders from the region called under the auspices of UNESCO in the archaeological site Viminitium, and the topic was the role of contemporary art in the reconciliation in the Balkans. My question is this just a one-off event, or did really our politicians decide to do the right step in the right direction? Is there going to be more of the same or similar in the foreseeable future? Thank you.
All right, one more question before we come back to the panel. Yeah, there's a lady over there.
Pozdravljam uvaženi skup, moje ime je Smina Dizdarić, student sam i predsjednica Studentskog parlamenta Univerzitetu u Sarajevu. Moje pitanje ide svim panelistima, ali posebno pitanje je koncipirano i da kažem pozitivno isprovocirano od strane ministra Milana. Spomenuli ste nešto ključno, spomenuli ste učenje, spomenuli ste proces učenja. Želim da stavim i apostrofiram sljedeće pitanje. Koliko nam zaista treba vremena da učimo na materijalu koji svaki dan porađa konflikt? Zaista, imam 20 godina, živim u Bosni i Hercegovini i ne želim da vjerujem Indiri Gandhi kada kaže kada trčimo najvećim intenzitetom, stojimo u mjestu. Mladi Bosni i Hercegovini ne zaslužuju pomicanje dalje, ali također ne zaslužuju da konstantno slušamo pojedinačna pravdanja po zemljama. Hvala.
Well, all right, we've got two questions from students from Bosnia, so I don't know who would like to start with that. And then Mrs. Licht, who would like to start? Ms. Linsko, would you like to address those questions from your
I would like to come back very briefly to Ambassador Lichen from Austria about societal exclusion, humiliation, and societal infrastructure destroyed. This societal infrastructure destroyed is, I think we have to see it in many layers. In some basic layers, it still works. And it is actually embarrassing for us Europeans how people, how society in the Balkans, doesn't matter. I was 5 times in the former Yugoslavia, how they stick together, how they help each other. Yeah? And I think sometimes we need to Balkanize Europe in this sense, because this society is still working so strongly together. But of course, it goes both ways, also Europeanize the Balkan. But in certain aspects, it's much a warmer society than so-called Western Europe. The question about bills and when we'll be able together, I have no straightforward answer, but the German-French model was already mentioned. You know that the last war criminal was only sentenced 5 or 6 months ago, Demjanjuk, this last war criminal from Second World War. So it takes some time, reconciliation. We have written a common history book between Italy and Austria. It took decades, but this is a way. And at the same time, we have parallel societies. We still had a funeral this year of 600 people in Srebrenica. At the same time, Bosnia, Croats, and Serbs are cooperating already in Bosnia. So it will take some time, but I think the young people are the future. As I told you, I assembled 100 young people. They gave 100 ideas, a vision for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And about the last question Sonja Licht asked is, I think Eurosong is some sort of example how it can be done when each of the new states are giving support to each other. We have had this UNESCO conference. I had a small event last week in Srebrenica. You wouldn't believe it. There was a German circus coming from Germany to Srebrenica. But the speciality of the circus is it has no artists. It's collecting and looking for artists on the ground, and these artists are children. Then there is a training of 10 days, and then there is a gala premiere. And we were scared, that we would have only Serb children or only Bosniak children. But it happened that when the training was going on, that Jovan told his father when they were driving to the training, he said, Jovan said to his father, here is Mustafa, can you pick him up? He's walking to the training, yeah? And so now Mustafa and Jovan are friends. And this was a huge success, Serb and Bosniak children performing together in this circus, yeah? And there are many such examples, but in the newspapers you usually don't read about these examples. You only read about conflicts.
Okay, does anyone else like to pick up any of the other questions? Mr. Roshan, go ahead. You want to pick up on one of the questions? Yeah? Go ahead. Go ahead. And if we keep it brief, we can have one more round of questions.
Since I had some questions regarding students' question from Republic Srpska. Yes, we can. When it comes to the education, on the eve of disintegration of Yugoslavia, we had Branko Horvat, famous Croatian professor. He was member of Central Committee of Communist Party. When the changes in Montenegro started, he was invited to come to Montenegro, and we were criticized by political leaders from Croatia. And then young students asked him, Professor, how can we fight all of that? He said, become members of the party and start working from within. So my answer is become a part of the system and change the things. And a famous Serbian author, very popular, used to say, as if he saw everything, start beating your children as soon as you see that they look like you, that they behave like you. Let's wait and see what young people want, and let our children see what our fathers and forefathers didn't do well. With states and countries is like with people. There is something good in each and every country, in each and every place, in each and every human. So you should look for good things to see what is it that can bring people together. We mentioned the meeting that took place in Belgrade, where we spoke with nostalgia about the past. Let's see and let's look into good things that we had together, that brought us together. Regarding Ms. Licht's question, I appreciate what Professor Debedak said about the project. They didn't wait for politicians to support them. They organized themselves and they felt the need to do something. You should not wait for politicians in cultural sphere to make initiative. It would be good that professionals meet, that people then organize themselves, and then they seek full support of politicians. And we have such a good heritage in former Yugoslavia region that it could bring us together and be a linchpin.
For all the talk about the regional cooperation, I have to say that the magazine that was established in early 2000 and gathers important luminous names from the region and across has been supported by the Scandinavian embassies in Sarajevo and then subsequently by Slovenian Foreign Ministry, which is so far the only ministry of the only country from the region or on the cusp of it, on the brink of it, that sees value in supporting this sort of magazines that, as I said, fly below, or cultural initiatives that fly below the radar, do not often make the headlines, but are working on the bottom-up approach that is changing ever so slowly the representations of reality and the mental frames with which we can grasp and make meaning out of the chaos also known as everyday life. And in that regard, I want to say, with all due respect and with a lot of melancholy, that 6 days are enough to change the political system, and 6 weeks are enough to change the economic system. But in order to change the mentality, one needs 60 years, says Ralph Dahrendorf.
Good. Okay. Well, you've all got that message about who's supporting The magazine, you've all heard that, right? Okay, sorry, Mr. Fisher, and then we'll go back one. Oh, so you want to make 30 seconds, and then we'll have one more round, because officially we're now finished, so we're into overtime, so be brief. But since we started late, we'll have one more round of questions. Go ahead.
Very briefly, it's nothing to do with economy, banking, and projects or something like that, but I would like to comment on or react on the, let's say, Austrian question on minorities, social exclusion, and so on and so forth. Don't reduce this issue just on Balkan countries. That's the problem which exceeds this region. It's knocking at the door in Europe. Let's have in mind the upswing and the mushrooming number of anti-migration parties in Western Europe. I would expose the story about the cohabitation of the majority society with Roma community in my country, in the Czech Republic, in Central Europe as well. So keep our eyes open. And the latest riots in the UK, it was also the song about some kind of social exclusion or something like that, which needs a very in-depth analysis, and it should draw the attention of the politicians.
Good.
Anyway,
Good.
So
Good.
not only on national but also European level as well. So
good point. Mr. Yarmich, 30 seconds, and then we'll have one more round of questions. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to then try and address only one of these questions from a student from Republika Srpska. Milan said, yes, we can. I'm going to say that it actually... Well, we certainly have this one thing in common, and that we do have a little bit of this yes, we can attitude. But I really want to be realistic here. Our capacity to resolve the outstanding issues is going to a large extent depend to a large extent from the environment that we're going to be subjected to as the Western Balkans. And the key aspect of this environment is the process of European integration. Right now, we can hear everybody talking about the green light for the Western Balkan states when it comes to the EU future. But I can assure you that there are certain quarters in which there are some red lights. So an overall picture is an orange light. And I remember, Tim would know what I speak about, I remember one of the commercials when I used to live in the UK. The future is bright, the future is orange. Well, the future is in certain sense, the future is orange for us at this very moment. I wish it goes back to the true and full green light, because I think it is going to be the key in whether or not we're going to have the capacity to deliver what you asked about, and for what I totally subscribe to Milan is that something that we can. It's only that I would add a but that refers to the time dimension of when can we achieve it, since you're raising 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, as I said, we started late, so we're going to go on. We'll have one more round of questions. Does the gentleman over there? Sorry, yes, please go ahead. Yeah? Yeah. Oh, so from Belgrade, okay. Please, but remember to tell everyone who you are.
Okay. Just one question. My name is Marko Šuicev. I'm from Faculty of Philosophy, Belgrade. To Mr. Rocen. You mentioned previously that new generations are even worse in nationalism than the previous one that were fighting on the front line. Since the first word here on the panel is responsibility, who is responsible for that situation? Educational system in Montenegro, or what? If those kids are now 17, 18, do you feel responsible and your government for this kind of situation? That's my question.
Okay, two more questions very briefly, and then, no, I'm afraid we've just got to stop because otherwise we're going to be causing diplomatic incidents about lunch and things. So please, very briefly.
Thank you very much. My name is Neža Grabus. I'm Mufti of Slovenia. I just want to mention the 3 or 4 times mentioned here Republika Srpska. I just want to mention that Republika Srpska is an entity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is not still independent state, so I please that you need to clarify that when somebody speaks, Professor Debeljak spoke about 7 new countries in former Yugoslavia. Still we have 7, no 8. Thank you very much.
Okay, but there was a lady over there. A lady over there. So, tell us who you are.
Thank you. I'm Sanja Bulatovic. I graduated in international relations at the University of Montenegro, Faculty of Political Science. I have a question for Mr. Rocen and Mr. Jeremic. Mr. Jeremic spoke about the green light, orange light, and so on. So I personally believe that only by true cooperation among Western Balkan countries can we achieve European integration. So when will we finally see, first of all, better cooperation and better language between the officials of our countries, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the other one is when we will see more university cooperation, more infrastructure, better infrastructure, and better travel connections, which are the concrete questions and concrete problems that we, the young people, are facing now, and that are essential for dealing with if we want to go to the EU.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I'm sorry that there's just really no more time for questions. I'm sorry that we can't do that, otherwise we really will have problems. Mr. Rocen, those 2 questions were directed to you, and there was one for you, Mr. Jeremic, and then we're going to close this panel.
You didn't get me right. So we talk about education in the region. It's not about education in Montenegro. You know that Montenegro is the only former Yugoslav state on which territory we didn't have any wars or war destruction. When I talked about education, I referred to the region that was struck by war, where they had warfare. So it's not Montenegro, it's about the neighborhood region. But Montenegro cannot be unharmed by that, because we had warfares in the neighborhood. There is remarks, particular piece about the after-war generation. About the destructive generation, and I'm sure that you know the answer to the question that you asked me regarding social inclusion and exclusion, we spoke about that, what it's like in Montenegro. At one moment during the warfares in former Yugoslavia, more than 25% of the population in Montenegro were refugees of all ethnic descents, and everyone commended Montenegro for that. Now we have 16.5 thousand people who live in Montenegro, and this is one of the things that will bring us closer to the EU, the treatment that we provided for them. And I told my friends in Brussels, the easiest way to settle the issue of refugees and IDPs is to give them the passports of Montenegro, and the next moment you will see them in the EU. And we are working closely with the EU to address the issue of refugees regarding the relations between Montenegro and Serbia. Very often there are lots of wrong assessments regarding and wrong evaluation of those relations, which are utterly wrong. The relations are much better than they might look at the surface. I know about the cooperation among universities and among institutions. Our citizens in Serbia or in Montenegro do not have any problems about those relations, and practically their lives have not changed since we became independent. We work together on infrastructural projects. We do the reconstruction of the railroad between Belgrade and Bar. We try to to pull some funds to make the highway between Bar and Boljari to connect better. And they are our key foreign trade partner. Small Montenegro is third most important foreign trade partner to Serbia. So there are problems, but only in some people's heads. And some people might not like to see those relations being good, and those could be just the reflections or nostalgia from the pre-referendum times. When many people regretted the fact that Montenegro is now has hands, its destiny in its hands.
How many states there are? It was really a lax conversation. People were mentioning Republika Srpska, but they were mentioning Kosovo as well. So if you want to really be pedantic, there are 6 UN member states in the region, and as far as Serbia is concerned, that's the number that should stay. We respect sovereignty and territorial integrity of all UN member states, be it Bosnia's, Georgia's, be any other country, but we expect others to respect ours. You want to start changing the rules, you want to start throwing away the obligations from the UN Charter and the Helsinki Final Act when it comes to respecting the borders and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of UN member states, then I think you may end up with more than 6, but I don't know how many more.
All right, well, I think that could be referred to the Guinea-Bissau question also. But let's call it a day, because I'm afraid that we really have run out of time, and I'm sorry because there were lots more people who wanted to ask questions. And to draw on what Aleš said, we could in fact sit here for another 60 years talking, but I think we'd get pretty hungry, and some people have got important lunch dates, and I would like to say thank you to all the panelists, and thanks again to Telekom Slovenia.